The radar screen flickered once, twice, then went dark. Lieutenant Commander Vera Falcon Kowalski's FA-18E Super Hornet had simply vanished from the USS Gerald R. Ford's Combat Information Center, leaving behind only the echo of her last transmission crackling through the static. Mayday, Mayday, Falcon 07 experiencing catastrophic engine failure, going down hard, coordinates, then silence. The kind of silence that swallows hope whole. Captain Marcus Torres stared at the empty blip, where Falcon's transponder had been painting steady for the past 4 hours. Around him, the CIC hummed with barely contained panic. Radar operators frantically adjusted their scopes, searching for any trace of the missing Super Hornet. The amber glow of their screens cast shadows across faces that had seen too many good pilots disappear into the unforgiving waters of the Arabian Sea. "Sir, we've got SAR helicopters inbound to last known position," reported Lieutenant Sarah Chen, her voice professionally steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Weather's deteriorating fast, visibility dropping to near zero with 40-knot winds." Torres nodded grimly. He'd flown with Kowalski in the early days, back when she was still fighting to prove herself in a cockpit that many believed belonged to men. Falcon had earned her call sign the hard way, through precision flying that made eagles look clumsy, and a tactical mind that could outthink enemy pilots before they even knew they were being hunted. Now the best stick-and-rudder pilot in the squadron was probably feeding sharks 200 miles from the nearest land. The storm had rolled in like a gray wall of judgment, turning the Arabian Sea into a churning cauldron of 30-foot swells and sideways rain. Perfect conditions for a pilot to disappear forever. But Falcon wasn't just any pilot. She was the woman who'd pulled off the impossible Hormuz run 6 months ago, threading her Super Hornet through a gauntlet of surface-to-air missiles to deliver critical intelligence that had saved an entire Marine expeditionary unit. She was the aviator who'd landed a crippled FA-18 on a carrier deck in the middle of a typhoon, with one engine out and hydraulics failing. Torres found himself gripping the edge of the tactical display, knuckles white against the metal. Somewhere out there in that maelstrom, Falcon was either floating in a life raft or already claimed by the depths. The thought made his stomach clench. In a navy where reputation was everything and respect was earned drop by drop, Vera Kowalski had become something approaching legend. The rescue helicopters would search until they ran out of fuel or the weather forced them back. But Torres already knew what they would find. The Arabian Sea kept its secrets, and today it had claimed another warrior. 24 hours later, the impossible happened. The radio crackled to life with a transmission that would change everything. "USS Gerald R. Ford, this is Falcon 07, requesting immediate priority landing, code Bravo authentication over." The voice was unmistakable, though strained with exhaustion and something else, something harder to identify. In the stunned silence that followed, every person in the CIC felt the hair on their arms stand on end. Code Bravo wasn't just a landing request. It was a classified authentication protocol reserved for missions that officially didn't exist, for pilots who carried secrets worth more than their lives. Torres grabbed the radio handset, his voice barely controlled. "Falcon 07, this is Ford Actual. Confirm your identity and current position. We show you as missing in action." The response came through crystal clear, riding on radio waves that seemed to carry the weight of the impossible. "Ford Actual, Falcon 07. Grid reference Papa 779er, altitude 32,000 feet, inbound on Vector 080. I'm bringing home the package." In the background of her transmission, they could hear the distinctive whine of turbofan engines pushed to their limits. But that was impossible. Falcon's Super Hornet had gone down in flames 24 hours ago. The debris field had been spotted by satellite imagery, scattered wreckage spread across 2 square miles of ocean. The Navy had already begun drafting casualty reports. Yet here she was, somehow flying at altitude in controlled airspace, requesting clearance to land with authentication codes that shouldn't exist. Torres felt his worldview tilt sideways. In 30 years of naval aviation, he'd never encountered anything like this. Pilots didn't rise from the dead with mysterious packages and classified protocols. Falcon 07, Squawk 7700 and maintain current heading. We're clearing the deck for immediate recovery. Torres paused, then added the question that was burning through his mind. Falcon, what's your aircraft type and condition? The response came back with that same exhausted professionalism. Ford Actual, I'm flying a borrowed ride. Aircraft type is classified. Condition is marginal but stable. I'll need crash crew standing by and a medical team. And sir, clear the deck of all non-essential personnel. What I'm carrying can't be seen by unauthorized eyes. Torres looked around the CIC, seeing his own confusion reflected in every face. A borrowed ride. From where? They were operating in international waters, hundreds of miles from any friendly airfield. The nearest land was a stretch of Iranian coastline that might as well have been on the moon for all the sanctuary it offered a downed American pilot. Roger that, Falcon. We're rolling out the red carpet. Ford Actual out. As the ship's general quarters alarm began to wail, Torres couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to receive more than just a missing pilot. Whatever Falcon had been through in the past 24 hours, whatever she discovered or acquired, it was significant enough to justify the impossible. In the world of naval aviation, impossible was just another word for classified. The flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford buzzed with controlled chaos as the recovery team prepared for Falcon's return. Yellow-shirted aircraft handlers scurried across the deck, ensuring clear approaches to all 4 arresting wires. The crash crew stood ready beside their fire trucks, foam cannons loaded and pressurized. Medical personnel wheeled a gurney toward the deck edge, anticipating the worst. Lieutenant Commander Jake "Bulldog" Morrison, the squadron's second-in-command, stood in Pryfly watching the approach radar. As Falcon's wingman on countless missions, he knew her flying style better than anyone. She favored aggressive approaches, coming in hot and fast, treating the carrier deck like a stationary target to be conquered rather than a safe haven to be approached with caution. Contact bearing 082, 12 miles out, called the approach controller. Falcon 07 Ford approach, you're cleared for straighten approach, runway 29. Winds are 030 at 25 knots, visibility 2 miles in precipitation. The response crackled through the radio with that familiar edge of controlled aggression. Ford approach, Falcon 07. I've got you painted, coming in hot on the ball. Be advised, this bird handles different than what you're used to. Don't let the unusual silhouette spook anyone. Morrison frowned. Unusual silhouette. Falcon had been flying the same Block III Super Hornet for 8 months. He'd walked around that aircraft himself, knew every rivet and panel. What could be unusual about? Jesus Christ, whispered the landing signal officer, lowering his binoculars. What the hell is that thing? Through the gray curtain of rain and mist, a shape materialized that defied immediate identification. It wasn't the familiar twin-tailed silhouette of an FA-18 Super Hornet. This aircraft was sleeker, more angular, with swept wings that seemed to slice through the air like a blade. Even through the poor visibility, its radar-absorbing coating gave it an otherworldly appearance, as if it were constructed from solidified shadows. That's not one of ours, Morrison said, his voice tight with disbelief. That's not anything in the inventory. The aircraft's approach was flawless despite the deteriorating weather. Falcon's voice came through the radio with the calm professionalism of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, though the fatigue was evident in every word. Ford approach, Falcon 07 on final 3/4 mile, call the ball. Roger ball, Falcon. You're looking good on glide slope on centerline. Bring it aboard. The mystery aircraft touched down with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, catching the 3-wire exactly as intended. The arresting gear brought the strange jet to a violent halt in less than 200 feet, its engines spooling down with a sound unlike anything the deck crew had ever heard. A deeper, more resonant whine that seemed to vibrate through the steel deck plates. As the aircraft came to rest, Morrison could see details that made his blood run cold. The jet's skin wasn't just dark, it was composed of faceted surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were no visible navigation lights, no squadron markings, no tail numbers. It was as if someone had taken the concept of stealth and pushed it far beyond anything in the American arsenal. The canopy opened with a hydraulic hiss, and a figure in a flight suit emerged, moving with the careful precision of someone operating on pure adrenaline and willpower. Even from a distance, Morrison could see the exhaustion in Falcon's movements, the way she favored her left arm as she climbed down from the cockpit. But it was what she carried that made Morrison's breath catch in his throat. Strapped to her survival vest was a metal briefcase, its surface covered in warning symbols and alphanumeric codes that he didn't recognize. Whatever was inside that case, it was important enough to risk everything, including flying an aircraft that shouldn't exist back to a carrier deck in the middle of a storm. As Falcon's boots touched the deck, the crash crew surrounded her, but she waved them off with a gesture that was both tired and authoritative. Her helmet was off now, revealing a face that looked like it had aged years in the span of 24 hours. There were stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her usually perfect hair was matted with sweat and something that might have been blood. "Stand back," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the deck despite the wind. "Nobody touches this aircraft without proper clearance. I need to speak to Captain Torres immediately, and I need a secure communications line to Norfolk." The briefcase never left her grip, held against her chest like a shield against the questions that were already forming in the minds of everyone who witnessed her impossible return. Whatever secrets it contained, they were worth more than explanations, more than the normal protocols that governed carrier operations. In the space of 30 seconds, Lieutenant Commander Vera Kowalski had transformed from a presumed casualty of war into the bearer of mysteries that would reshape everything the Navy thought it knew about the possible. Captain Torres met Falcon at the base of the island superstructure, his face a mask of professional concern barely concealing deeper questions. The wind whipped across the deck, carrying with it the smell of jet fuel and the metallic tang of rain on steel. Around them, the recovery crew worked with practiced efficiency, but Torres could see the sideways glances, the whispered conversations. Word of the mystery aircraft was already spreading through the ship's gossip network like wildfire. "Commander Kowalski," Torres said formally, though his eyes were focused on the briefcase clutched in her arms. "I'm glad to see you alive. We need to debrief immediately." Falcon nodded, her jaw set in a way that Torres recognized from their previous encounters. It was the expression she wore when she was holding back information that could change everything. "Sir, I need to contact Admiral Patterson at Fleet Command before I can discuss operational details. What I'm carrying requires immediate attention at the highest levels." "What exactly are you carrying, Falcon?" She glanced around the deck, nodding the curious stares from crew members who were trying to look busy while straining to overhear their conversation. "Not here, sir. Too many ears. But I can tell you that our intelligence assessments about enemy capabilities were incomplete." Torres felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. In his experience, when pilots started talking about incomplete intelligence assessments, it usually meant that someone had been badly underestimating the opposition. How incomplete? "The kind of incomplete that gets fleets sunk and wars lost, sir." Falcon's voice was barely above a whisper, but each word carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I've been inside their operational area for the past 24 hours. What I've seen, what I've documented, it changes everything we thought we knew about the balance of power in this region." Torres gestured toward the island's superstructure, indicating they should continue their conversation in private. As they walked, He noticed that Falcon moved with the careful gait of someone who'd been through significant physical trauma. Her left arm was definitely injured, held stiffly against her side, and there was a slight limp in her step that suggested impacts and stress that no routine flight should have involved. "That aircraft you flew in," Torres said as they climbed the stairs toward his quarters. "It's not in any recognition manual I've ever seen." "No, sir, it wouldn't be. It's not one of ours and it's not supposed to exist." Falcon paused at the top of the stairs, looking back toward the flight deck where the mysterious jet sat under armed guard. "But it does exist, and if the intelligence I'm carrying is accurate, it's not the only one." The implications of her words hit Torres like a physical blow. An enemy aircraft capable of penetrating deep into American operational areas, advanced enough to evade detection by the most sophisticated radar systems in the world, and apparently available in sufficient numbers to pose a strategic threat. It was the kind of intelligence that started wars or ended them, depending on how it was handled. How many others know about this? As of right now, just me, sir. The people who were supposed to receive this intelligence. Falcon's voice trailed off, and Torres caught a glimpse of something haunted in her eyes. They're not in a position to receive anything anymore. Torres stopped walking, the full magnitude of the situation beginning to dawn on him. "Commander, are you telling me that you're the sole surviving member of a classified mission?" "I'm telling you that I'm the only one who made it out, sir, and what I learned while I was there is going to change how we fight this war." Falcon shifted the briefcase to her other arm, wincing slightly at the movement. "The enemy isn't just more advanced than we thought. They're more advanced than we imagined possible." As they reached the corridor leading to Tor's quarters, the ship's announcement system crackled to life. "All department heads report to the wardroom immediately. All department heads report to the wardroom immediately." Torres looked at Falcon, seeing his own understanding reflected in her tired eyes. Whatever intelligence she'd brought back was significant enough to warrant immediate briefings at the highest levels. Within hours, encrypted communications would be flying between the carrier and Norfolk, probably reaching all the way to the Pentagon and the White House Situation Room. "Commander, I need to know something before we go any further," Torres said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Are we talking about a tactical advantage or a strategic game changer?" Falcon met his gaze directly, and in her eyes he saw the reflection of someone who'd looked into the abyss and brought back proof of its existence. "Sir, if what I've documented is accurate, we're not just behind in the arms race. We're playing a completely different game than we thought we were playing." The silence that followed was filled with the ambient sounds of a carrier at sea, the distant hum of turbines, the whisper of ventilation systems, the occasional metallic clank of equipment being moved or secured. But underneath it all, Torres could hear something else, the sound of assumptions being shattered and certainties being ground to dust. The wardroom fell silent as Captain Torres and Commander Kowalski entered, the usual buzz of conversation dying instantly. Around the polished table sat the ship's senior staff, department heads, squadron commanders, and intelligence officers who'd been hastily summoned from their various duties. The briefcase in Falcon's arms seemed to draw every eye in the room, its presence somehow more commanding than any flag or insignia. Commander Patricia Ice Rodriguez, the ship's intelligence officer, leaned forward with barely concealed curiosity. She'd been tracking enemy movements in the region for 6 months, building profiles and assessments that had guided operational planning. The idea that a single pilot might possess intelligence that could overturn months of careful analysis was both intriguing and deeply unsettling. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres began, his voice carrying the formal weight of classified proceedings, "what we discuss in this room does not leave this room. Commander Kowalski has returned from a mission that officially didn't happen, carrying intelligence that officially doesn't exist." Falcon stood at the head of the table, the briefcase now resting on the polished surface before her. Despite her obvious exhaustion, She commanded the room with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen things that others could only imagine. 12 hours ago, I was shot down over enemy territory while conducting a classified reconnaissance mission. What I discovered during my time behind enemy lines represents a fundamental shift in our understanding of the tactical and strategic situation. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who'd been silent since witnessing her impossible landing, finally spoke up. "Falcon, that aircraft you flew back, where did it come from? Our intelligence reports don't mention anything like it in enemy inventories." "That's because our intelligence reports are based on outdated assumptions, sir." Falcon's voice carried a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "The enemy has capabilities that we've been systematically underestimating for months. The aircraft I flew, let's call it a borrowed asset, represents technology that's at least a generation ahead of our most advanced systems." Rodriguez pulled out a tablet, her fingers already working across the screen. "Commander, I need specifics. Performance characteristics, weapons systems, operational capabilities. If they're fielding advanced aircraft, we need to update our threat assessments immediately." "Ma'am, with respect, updating threat assessments is the least of our concerns." Falcon opened the briefcase with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, were data drives, photographs, and documents that looked like they'd been acquired under extreme duress. "What I've brought back indicates that we're not just facing an enemy with better technology. We're facing an enemy who's been playing a completely different game." She pulled out a series of photographs, each one showing aircraft and installations that looked simultaneously familiar and alien. The designs were sleek and angular, with radar-absorbing surfaces that gave them an otherworldly appearance. But it was the scale of the operations visible in the images that made several officers lean forward in their chairs. "These were taken at a facility approximately 200 miles northeast of our current position," Falcon continued. "The enemy has constructed what can only be described as a forward operating base of unprecedented sophistication. They're not just developing advanced aircraft, they're mass-producing them." Torres studied the photographs, his experienced eye picking out details that chilled him to the bone. The facility was enormous, with multiple runways, hardened aircraft shelters, and what appeared to be manufacturing capabilities that could turn out dozens of advanced fighters per month. "How did our satellites miss this?" "Because it's designed to be invisible to satellite reconnaissance, sir. The entire facility is covered by adaptive camouflage systems that can mimic surrounding terrain in real time. From altitude, it looks like empty desert, but from ground level—" Falcon's voice trailed off as she pulled out additional photographs showing the true scope of the installation. The images revealed a complex that stretched for miles, with underground facilities that appeared to house not just aircraft but entire production lines. It was the kind of strategic asset that could tip the balance of power in the region, the kind of target that would require massive resources to neutralize. "My God," whispered Commander Rodriguez, "if they can hide something this large from our reconnaissance assets, what else are we missing?" Falcon's expression grew even more somber. "Ma'am, that's exactly the question we need to be asking. Because based on what I observed during my time in their operational area, this facility isn't unique. It's part of a network." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant sound of the carrier's engines and the whisper of ventilation systems. Each person in the room was grappling with the implications of what they were hearing, that their enemy possessed not just advanced technology, but the industrial capacity to deploy it on a scale that could overwhelm American forces in the region. "Commander," Torres said finally, his voice carefully controlled, "I need to know how you acquired this intelligence. The methods matter as much as the information itself." Falcon met his gaze directly. "Sir, I infiltrated the facility during a window of opportunity that presented itself after my aircraft went down. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every detail has been verified through multiple sources and corroborated by the physical evidence in this briefcase. She paused, seeming to gather herself for what came next. The enemy didn't just shoot me down, sir. They captured me. The temperature in the wardroom seemed to drop several degrees. Capture of American military personnel was always a serious matter, but the capture of a pilot carrying classified knowledge was a strategic nightmare. The fact that Falcon had escaped and brought back intelligence rather than being held for interrogation or exchange suggested that her experience had been far more complex than a simple shoot-down and rescue. "How long were you in enemy custody?" Torres asked, his voice tight with concern. "Approximately 18 hours, sir. During that time, I was held at the facility I've documented, and I was able to observe their operations firsthand. What I saw there convinced me that we're not just facing a technological disadvantage, we're facing an enemy who understands warfare in ways we're only beginning to comprehend." As the implications of her words sank in, Torres realized that they were no longer dealing with a simple intelligence briefing. They were witnessing the moment when the nature of the conflict itself had fundamentally changed, when all their assumptions about enemy capabilities and intentions had been proven dangerously inadequate. The secure communications console in the wardroom chirped insistently, its encrypted display showing an incoming transmission marked with the highest priority classifications. Commander Rodriguez moved to answer it, her face growing pale as she read the message scrolling across the screen. "Sir," she said, her voice barely steady, "Norfolk is requesting immediate transfer of all intelligence materials via SecureLink. Admiral Patterson wants to speak with Commander Kowalski directly." Torres nodded grimly. The fact that Fleet Command was moving this quickly confirmed his worst fears about the significance of Falcon's intelligence. "Commander Rodriguez, establish the link immediately, and I want this room cleared of all personnel except senior staff." As junior officers filed out of the wardroom, Falcon remained standing at the head of the table, her hand resting protectively on the briefcase. The weight of what she'd experienced was visible in every line of her body, but there was something else there too, a determination that Torres recognized from their previous encounters. She'd been through hell and brought back proof of its existence, and now she was prepared to do whatever was necessary to ensure that her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. "Before we connect with Norfolk," Torres said quietly, "I need to know something. Are you physically and mentally capable of continuing this briefing? What you've been through?" "Sir, I'm the only person alive who's seen what I've seen," Falcon interrupted, her voice carrying quiet steel. "I'll brief whoever needs to be briefed, for as long as it takes. Too many good people have died for this intelligence to be delayed by personal considerations." The secure link to Norfolk crackled to life, and Admiral Patterson's voice filled the room with the authority of someone who'd been briefed on enough impossible situations to take them in stride. "Captain Torres, Commander Kowalski, I'm reading your preliminary report, and I need confirmation that we're dealing with verified intelligence rather than enemy disinformation." Falcon stepped forward, her voice clear and professional despite her obvious exhaustion. "Admiral, I've brought back physical evidence, technical documentation, and photographic proof of enemy capabilities that exceed our current threat assessments by significant margins. The intelligence has been verified through multiple independent sources during my time in their operational area. Commander, I'm looking at satellite imagery of your supposed crash site. We show definitive debris patterns consistent with aircraft destruction. How exactly are you alive, and how exactly did you acquire intelligence from inside enemy territory?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Torres could see the weight of it settling on Falcon's shoulders. She'd been through something that defied easy explanation, something that probably involved classified methods and sources that couldn't be discussed even in a secure briefing. "Admiral, my extraction from the crash site was unconventional. I was provided with assistance by assets that I cannot identify over this communication channel. What I can tell you is that the intelligence I've brought back represents a clear and present danger to American forces in this region and potentially beyond. Patterson's response came after a pause that seemed to stretch forever. Commander, I'm authorizing immediate transfer of all intelligence materials to Norfolk for analysis. Captain Torres, I want Commander Kowalski aboard the first available transport to Washington. She'll be briefing the Joint Chiefs within 48 hours. Torres felt his stomach drop. When pilots were summoned to brief the Joint Chiefs, it usually meant that their intelligence was significant enough to influence strategic planning at the highest levels. It also meant that Falcon would be entering a world where the stakes were measured in national security implications rather than tactical advantages. Admiral, respectfully, I'd like to remain with my squadron, Falcon said, her voice carrying a note of quiet determination. My place is here, with my unit, not in Washington briefing rooms. Commander, your place is wherever your country needs you to be, and right now, your country needs you to ensure that what you've learned doesn't die with you. Patterson's voice softened slightly. I know you'd rather be flying missions, but the intelligence you've brought back is too important to risk in combat operations. As the communication link closed, Torres looked at Falcon and saw something that he'd never seen before in her eyes, the recognition that her war had fundamentally changed. She was no longer just a pilot flying missions and engaging enemy aircraft. She'd become a strategic asset, a keeper of secrets that could determine the outcome of the conflict. Falcon, he said quietly, I need you to know that whatever you've been through, whatever you've seen, you've done something that's going to make a difference. The kind of difference that changes the course of wars. She nodded, her hand still resting on the briefcase that contained proof of the impossible. Sir, I just hope it's enough. Because if what I've seen is accurate, we're going to need every advantage we can get. The flight deck was a symphony of controlled chaos as the COD, Carrier Onboard Delivery Aircraft, prepared for launch. The C-2 Greyhound's twin turboprops spun up with a rising whine that cut through the constant background noise of carrier operations. In 12 hours, Commander Kowalski would be sitting in a Pentagon briefing room, but for now she stood at the edge of the flight deck, watching the organized precision of the launch sequence. Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached, carrying a flight bag that he set down beside her. Falcon, I packed some things from your quarters. Thought you might need them in Washington. She turned to face him, and he was struck by how much she'd changed in the past 48 hours. The confident pilot who'd launched on what should have been a routine reconnaissance mission was gone, replaced by someone who'd seen too much and carried the weight of impossible knowledge. Jake, I need you to do something for me, she said, her voice barely audible above the deck noise. If something happens to me in Washington, if I don't make it back, I need you to remember what I'm about to tell you. Morrison frowned. Falcon, you're going to brief some admirals and generals, not disappear into a black site. What's got you so spooked? She looked out at the gray expanse of the Arabian Sea, where somewhere beneath the waves lay the wreckage of her original aircraft. The people I encountered behind enemy lines, they knew things about our operations that they shouldn't have known, details about our mission planning, our capabilities, our weaknesses. Jake, I think we have a problem that goes beyond advanced technology. The implications of her words hit Morrison like a physical blow. In the world of military intelligence, there were few things more dangerous than the possibility of compromise at the highest levels. Are you saying we have a leak? I'm saying that the enemy knew I was coming before I knew I was going. They were ready for me, Jake. Not just prepared, ready. Falcon's voice carried a weight of certainty that chilled Morrison to the bone. Someone with access to classified mission planning has been feeding them information. As the COD's engines reached launch power, the conversation became impossible to continue. Falcon picked up her flight bag and walked toward the aircraft, but not before turning back to Morrison one last time. If I don't make it back, remember what I told you. And watch your six out there. Trust, but verify everything. The launch sequence proceeded with mechanical precision, but Morrison found himself watching the COD disappear into the overcast sky with a sense of foreboding that had nothing to do with weather or normal operational hazards. If Falcon was right about a security breach, then every pilot in the squadron was potentially flying into prepared ambushes. 3 hours later, Morrison found himself in the squadron-ready room, staring at a mission board that suddenly looked different. Every target assignment, every route of flight, every tactical parameter now carried the shadow of potential compromise. How many missions had been planned by people who might be feeding information to the enemy? How many pilots had been lost because they'd walked into prepared traps? "Bulldog, you look like someone stole your lunch money," said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Viper Martinez, settling into the chair beside him. "What's eating you?" Morrison considered his response carefully. Falcon's warning had been delivered in confidence, but the implications were too serious to ignore. "Viper, hypothetically speaking, if you suspected that mission planning was being compromised, what would you do?" Martinez's expression grew serious. "Hypothetically, I'd document everything, keep copies of all mission parameters and start looking for patterns. Why? What's got you thinking about security breaches?" Before Morrison could answer, the Ready Room's secure communication system crackled to life with a message that made both pilots freeze in their chairs. "All squadron commanders report to the wardroom immediately. Code Red Security Alert. All squadron commanders report to the wardroom immediately." As they hurried toward the wardroom, Morrison realized that Falcon's warning might have been more prescient than he'd initially understood. Code Red security alerts were reserved for situations where operational security had been definitively compromised, where the safety of personnel and the success of missions were in immediate jeopardy. The wardroom was packed with senior officers, their faces reflecting varying degrees of concern and confusion. Captain Torres stood at the head of the table, his expression grim as he waited for the last of the squadron commanders to arrive. "Gentlemen, ladies," Torres began, his voice carrying the weight of unwelcome news, "we've received confirmation from Fleet Intelligence that our operational security has been compromised. Details of recent missions, including classified reconnaissance flights, have been intercepted by enemy forces." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant sound of aircraft operations on the deck above. Each person in the room was grappling with the implications of what they'd just heard, that their most sensitive operations had been exposed to enemy scrutiny. "Sir," Morrison said, his voice carefully controlled, "what's the scope of the compromise? Are we talking about specific missions or broader intelligence about our capabilities?" Tor's expression grew even more somber. "Commander, we're talking about a compromise that goes to the heart of our operational planning. The enemy has had access to mission parameters, flight routes, and tactical objectives for an undetermined period of time." As the briefing continued, Morrison found himself thinking about Falcon's final words before her departure. She'd suspected something was wrong, had seen evidence of enemy preparation that couldn't be explained by normal intelligence gathering. Now her suspicions were being confirmed by official channels, validating her instincts in a way that provided no comfort whatsoever. The war had changed, and not just because of advanced enemy technology. It had changed because trust itself had become a casualty, because the foundations of operational security had been shattered. Every future mission would now be planned with the assumption that the enemy might know exactly what was coming. In the Pentagon's secure briefing room, the walls seemed to close in as Commander Kowalski faced a collection of stars and eagles that represented the highest levels of American military leadership. The Joint Chiefs sat around a polished table, their faces reflecting the gravity of intelligence that had the potential to reshape strategic planning across multiple theaters of operation. General Robert Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward as Falcon concluded her initial briefing. The photographs and technical documentation spread across the table painted a picture of enemy capabilities that exceeded even the most pessimistic intelligence assessments. "Commander, I need clarification on one point," Hayes said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of lives. "You're telling us that this advanced technology isn't just prototype development, it's in active production." Falcon nodded, her exhaustion evident but her professionalism unwavering. "Sir, based on my direct observation of their manufacturing facilities, they're producing advanced aircraft at a rate that suggests immediate operational deployment. This isn't research and development, it's mass production." Admiral Susan Chen, Chief of Naval Operations, pulled out a classified report that had been hastily prepared based on Falcon's initial intelligence. "Commander, our analysts have been studying your documentation, and they're having difficulty reconciling what you've reported with our existing intelligence assessments. The technological leap you're describing would require research and development programs that should have been detectable through normal intelligence channels." "Ma'am, respectfully, our normal intelligence channels have been systematically compromised," Falcon replied, her voice carrying quiet conviction. "The enemy has been feeding us information designed to make us underestimate their capabilities while simultaneously gathering intelligence about our own operations and limitations." The statement hung in the air like an accusation, and several officers exchanged glances that reflected their own growing concerns about operational security. The idea that American intelligence assessments had been deliberately manipulated was almost as troubling as the revelation of advanced enemy technology. General Patricia Williams, Air Force Chief of Staff, studied the technical specifications that Falcon had brought back. "Commander, these performance parameters, if they're accurate, suggest that our air superiority doctrine needs fundamental revision. We're not just facing better aircraft, we're facing aircraft that operate under completely different principles." "General, that's exactly what I observed during my time in their operational area," Falcon confirmed. "Their aircraft don't just outperform ours in traditional metrics like speed and maneuverability. They operate using principles that we haven't fully incorporated into our own development programs." Hayes,